started to preach on this channel because of Ralph Waldo Emerson. He is a pantheist, just like me. I'm reading this book. I'm definitely not anywhere near through. I read like 7 books at a time. I don't really know. Um, but I started to preach because of Ralph Waldo Emerson. He is a pantheist, and I think that if anyone ever happens to stumble upon my videos, that they might be helpful to them for some fucking reason. So that's why I've started to preach, because that's what Ralph Waldo Emerson did. He used to be a preacher, and then he left the church in order to find Spinoza's religion, which is more scientific and based in the principles of physics. And basically, it just says that the universe is a blob of harmony and defined by the base of the laws of physics. And Einstein was a pantheist too. And so I've started. Fuck, I keep on saying this thing over and over again, but I've started to preach because of Ralph Waldo Emerson, and that's what I'm going to do here. In the West, we are extremely afraid of death. I know this because I took a philosophy class called Death in college, and it was created and started by the ethics chair at the hospital attached to my school, the hospital of my school, and he wanted everyone to fear death. I think because it made him money, because then they would go get the special elixir of not death from the hospital. I call it the special elixir of not death because doctors don't really seem concerned about making life better and improving life. They seem more concerned about preventing death. So their special elixir of not death that's going to keep you alive. If you fear death, you're actually afraid of life. And that's why the Buddhists say that the Western fear of death is kind of like counterintuitive to living. Because you're afraid to take chances and you're like kind of stuck in this survival mode instead of a creation mode. Now, the other thing about fearing death is you're afraid of ego death. And all egos will convince you that they do not want to die. They're very persistent, stubborn buggers. And they live inside your mind, but they're a persistent illusion of the mind, just like relativity and time passing. Time is eternal. Eternalism is truth. But anyway, it's a persistent illusion of the mind. The mind's constantly hallucinating in its little fucking black box, and it's hallucinating this ego with the words of the universe and sense of self that it's created. To get rid of the ego, only you can. Kill your ego. Self-suicide of the ego. I kill my ego every single day. I think it helps me learn better. I learn from my past egos, but I'm not afraid to bash them. Lots of people are afraid to bash their past egos because they think it will prevent them from surviving. If you say you made a mistake and you're working at a really good company, they might fire you, and then you'll be without food and shelter and shit because you made a mistake. So you just try to hide and cover up your mistakes, but then you never learn from your mistakes. So like you just become this cycle of repetitive bullshit, which is what everyone gets stuck in. But if you aren't afraid to kill your ego, then you grow exponentially, and that's where you should be trying to get to. Learn from your past, live in the present, and create the future. So, how do you kill your ego? It's quite simple. You just fucking do it. You let go of your past. You live in the infinite present. I don't really know. I guess it's pretty easy for me because I was a compulsive lying person when I wasn't a trans man. I've always been a trans man, but I had a different ego that was a lie. It's possible to have a different ego that's a lie. Most people wear egos that are not their true self, at least on the outside. So I kind of know the fake nature of the ego from that direction, but lots of people who have had the same ego all their life have a really hard time letting it go because, like I said, the ego is a very persistent little bugger. Or if you have like spiritual connection with the universe, you kind of realize that it's all a lie because we're all connected and all one, which makes sense in physics considering that we all came from the singularity after it banged. Like, we didn't come in on spaceships after the singularity banged. We came from that blob of energy. The first law of thermodynamics is that energy is neither created nor destroyed, so you weren't created from, you were just a transfer of energy from the universe to you. That's all you are. You're just the energy of the universe manifested with a brain and a body, and the ego is a survival mechanism for humans that allows it to survive in the world of humanity. It particularly is that little, it allows us to hallucinate the future and plan for the future, and also have a really good memory of the past, which is why the ego kind of seems like a persistent delusion. But every single creature of the universe has a sense of self, otherwise, they wouldn't be able to survive. It allows them to self regulate and do all of these things. We just think our sense of self is special because we're able to put words to it. Which is how our ego is created, it's just a collection of words. And then the wonderful thing about that is you can kind of wear other people's egos if you pay attention to them and hear their words and understand their words, and then it synthesizes in your mind the concept of their ego, and you can understand their ego. And that is why people often have egos thrust on them by other people, because other people think that they can tell that person what they are and who they are at any given time because they understand the words to put on that person. And that's kind of how you get stuck in the ego cycle of whatever, because you can't really get rid of it because people expect you to say and do certain things unless you just like say, fuck it, I'm gonna be my true self no matter what. And the Buddhists have a monopoly on enlightenment, which is why I'm not part of them. But all enlightenment is I read the book The Gateless Gate. It's really fucking easy once you've gotten through the Gateless Gate. Like, it's like reading a fucking children's story. But the Gateless Gate is just like cones. All they do is point to this essential nature of the universe, that we are all one. And it doesn't make sense to live in a fake ego uh, of the past, or an ego that doesn't accurately and authentically represent your present self. It makes sense to let go of your past self and live in the infinite present as authentically as possible. But to do that, you kind of have to let go of the past. Like, you can learn from the past and then become a better version of yourself in the present, but you aren't the same person because the ego is just a persistent delusion, if anything. So that's why I kill my ego every day, because, like, bash me. Bash me every day, because tomorrow that ego will be gone. That ego's gonna be gone. So if you bash me and, like, it's actually accurate bashing, I can learn from it and grow from it. And then I'm gonna become better than you. And that's how I do it. That's how I do it. This is how we do it. But anyway, I encourage you to not be afraid of death like they tell you to do. I'm an Epicurean, if you want to look it up. I mean, I have lots of philosophies. I'm not just one thing. But Epicurus was this dude that said there's no point in fearing death because it's inevitable. And to fear something that's inevitable is irrational as hell, which is how I feel. And Epicurus, in his letter to Meniscus, which I had to read because of my philosophy of death class, and I was really excited because I read this letter, and it said exactly what I thought how we should feel about death. And then I got into this seminar class and I was like, yeah, I really like that letter. And my professor, the ethics chair of the hospital, was like, this letter is irrational bullshit. And from then on, I realized that I would not get along with this man, and I did not at all. I named my packer off of this man because, well, his name is Dick Dees. Like, come on. It's obviously the perfect name for a packer. It's my favorite packer. Dick Dees. And I tell it to his face that I named my packer off of him. But he gave me a B in the class. Although I used his, like, I set up his argument in all my papers and then I poked holes in it because it was illogical and irrational. But anyway, we're getting off track. This is too much about me and less about the universe. Which, another thing, like, all of what I say is from my perspective. Being a pantheist, I recognize other perspectives, and all I'm saying is that you should feel like your perspective is valid even if society's not telling you it, because we live in a het white male supremacist reality. So the reality is made to further those groups of people and fit their reality. So if you aren't of that group of people, which most people are not actually, then it's probably not going to fit you, and it's probably not even going to fit those people. So feel free to make your own knowledge. But basically what I'm getting at is that in Epicurus, this letter to Meniscus, is very short and pretty easy read, actually, because it's been translated. So I encourage you to read it. It's online. Uh, he says that to be unafraid of death is to become a god among men. And that's how it is. Like, if you are unafraid of death, you'll do things that no man or woman expects you to be able to do, because they'll think you're fucking crazy, because you aren't existing to survive, you're existing to create and be and generate life instead of being afraid of living. And in our society, that is not allowed. Our society worships death because it's so afraid of it. To be afraid of something is to worship that thing. It's the same thing. If you're afraid of your boss, you worship them. You can't you can't be afraid of something without putting that thing above you in some way. You're putting death above you. Death above life. Death above the present by fearing it. You can't. Because death is inevitable. To be born is to die. So it's ridiculousness, basically. And it's going to prevent you from being alive. So don't be afraid to die. Don't be afraid to kill your ego, even though it's a persistent little bugger. Don't be afraid to bash yourself and to learn from your past mistakes, because you aren't your mistakes. Especially if you learn from them. I mean, if you continue to make the same mistake over and over again, someone could say you kind of are your mistake at that point, because you have never learned and grown from them. But if you're learning and growing from your mistakes and bashing your past self, you are no longer that. You're something better than that. You have achieved enlightenment. You have grown beyond. And you will continue to infinitely grow, because we are all infinite beings. And we could not be stopped. Just like me. Try to stop me, you can't. I am one with the universe. Ha ha. Ha ha ha. I don't need your fame, because I have my own reality, and it's really fucking dope, and I love it. So don't necessarily believe someone just because they're above you if it doesn't fit you. Don't necessarily believe yourself just because you want that person to persist. That person is more of a mere illusion of the body and the mind. Well, I guess the body and the mind, the body and the brain, which are one and the same. But that's what your ego is. Your ego doesn't, there's no soul, seat of the soul. It doesn't live anywhere. It's just your brain firing on cylinders, creating some sort of persistent delusion. But you can let go of it at any time. So do it. Just see what happens. Just as an experiment. Kill your ego one day.